Kaya Wanju, hello and welcome everyone. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where we meet, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and pay my respects to elders past and present in the spirit of reconciliation. My name's Belinda Smith. I work with Miralinga Parenting Service, and we're offering you this short 25-30-minute webinar today as part of our Calm and Confident Parenting webinar series. And today's topic is tough conversations with children. So for those who are here in person, I'm sharing the screen, and for those who are listening in later, I will send the PowerPoint presentation so that you can have a look at it if you'd like, or of course you can just listen in. So the workshop today is based on ideas from hand-in-hand parenting, from a clinical psychologist who has an organisation called AHA Parenting, and from the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner here in Australia. I want to say thank you so much to you parents for all that you do. I know that it's incredibly busy work. It's a really full life, and I thank you for what it took for you to carve out this half an hour to listen. I know that that is actually a little bit like moving mountains some days, so thank you so much for doing that, and I hope you get lots of fresh ideas from being here. I also want to point out that this is a general talk about ideas for how best to handle difficult conversations with children aged 0 to 18, and it's based on evidence-based information, but due to the variables, so whichever topic you might be talking about, the age of the children you're talking with and other variables, not all of the advice will be suitable in all instances. So I just want to make that clear that you might like to consult a specialist for individualised support. A lot of what we'll be talking about are some fairly big issues. So I'd suggest that if you're facing any of these, it's a great time to reach out to get some more support. So the key messages from this short webinar are, firstly, just what kind of conversations might be considered tough. We'll just have a quick look at a list of them. And the second one, and probably the most important point today, is you are the captain of the ship. You are the leader of your family, and really it's so important for you to get support, particularly when you're faced with some challenging situations. The third point is around protecting your child and the importance of being that beautiful protector for them. The fourth one is about clarity and the importance of clarity and honesty when communicating with them. Number 5 is ask questions, listen, and accept all their feelings. And we'll look at a particular hand-in-hand parenting tool called Stay Listening, which is great for that. Number 6 is actually, this is not one conversation. These tough conversations happen again and again and again, not just the different ones, but also, you know, when we're having those conversations about sex education, for example, that's something that's perhaps for someone my era might have had that once with their parent, but we now know that repeating those conversations with warmth, with openness, with maybe even humour is a really important part of our child being able to develop to their potential. Number 7 is around giving our children help when they're faced with these difficult situations in their lives. And number 8 is getting help when needed, both for our children and ourselves. So there's quite a lot, but this is intended to be almost like a launch pad if you're faced with having some tough conversations with your children because you're faced with some difficult situations. The idea is that this gives you lots of springboards, lots of directions to go in, lots of new resources to look at, and I'll certainly be sending you links to lots of different ideas. So firstly, what kind of tough conversations might you be having? Now, to start with, you've got things like body parts, what you call them in your family, where did I come from, all of those conversations that we're having with little ones, conversations around consent and body autonomy, who gets to decide whether they hug a family member or not, and the short answer is them. Questions about gender. There's all sorts of shifts and changes culturally around gender that they might be asking questions about. Specifically today, I'll really be focused in on questions around death and divorce because they're probably 2 of the bigger ones, but there's so many. Climate, mental health, disability, terrorism and acts of violence, porn and online challenges, and also bullying, harshness from others or harshness to others, surrogacy, adoption, grandcarers, domestic violence, addiction issues, the list goes on. One thing we can be sure of is that if you're a parent, you're likely to have some tough conversations. So the first thing we suggest doing is get support for yourself. And the way that support might look is that you have a space where you can release your own tension and your own emotional backpack. You can unpack it a bit with perhaps a therapist, or maybe you've got a friend or a family member who's a really good listener and can listen well to you without interrupting or trying to fix things or give advice. As part of that support, you might like to start to think about what your family values are. And there's a link here to a family rules, creed, mission statement from Dr. Laura Markham at AHA Parenting. And that's a useful thing to work through in your family. Hand-in-hand parenting offers a great tool to support the emotional health of parents, and it's called listening partnerships. It's really beautiful. It's flexible. It's free. What it involves is a regular meeting between two parents. The information that's shared is kept confidential. There's no referring back. And we hold a space where there's no judgment, no advice, no fixing, and no interruptions. And if that sounds interesting to you, I'd love to see you at some of our other workshops. We almost always include listening partnerships because they are, without doubt, one of the most supportive structures for parents that I've found, and that deep listening and that sense of having a space where you can work through all of your feelings about what's going on so that you can then show up for your child feeling quite grounded. On to number 3, protecting your child. So the first point there is around the physical environment, what you're doing to make sure that they're protected. For example, online, are there some measures you can take to ensure that they're not exposed to things like porn when they're using devices? But also more generally, just making sure that they're safe and secure. Modelling consent practices and letting them take charge of their own body wherever possible, and supporting them to understand that no means no, those kinds of things, and respecting their privacy while still making sure they're safe. And this one is really tricky as they get older. I would say a lot of these ideas around protecting your child, you can really action until they're 7 or 8 relatively easily. And then it gets harder. And then once they're a teen, it gets harder again. But there are certainly ways to respect their privacy while still making sure they're safe. And the biggest one is to keep lines of conversation going between you. Giving them some space to test their own problem solving and support when they need or ask for it is important. And education. We know now that conversations early and often about all sorts of challenging topics are actually, as far as the evidence tells us, the best way to protect our children. And books can be a really useful starting point for conversations around things like death and divorce and some of those bigger issues we mentioned earlier. So you may like to visit your local library and ask the librarians there if they can point you towards books on whatever topic it is that you're facing. And that can be a really great conversation starter. And protecting your child also means establishing boundaries around what's okay and what's not okay. And I'm sure you as a family work on that all the time. Boundary setting is such a big part of being a parent. In terms of protecting them, another thing you can do is shield them from the media. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that children under 12 really can't make sense of a lot of what they see on a screen. So the news is really difficult for them to process. So trying to shield them from those experiences is a really good idea. And knowing that the best protection you can give them is actually the connection that you have with them. So resilience, we now know, comes from a feeling of being deeply connected to at least one grown-up. And that becomes a super protective factor as our children grow. So really working on your relationship, and that's something I'll mention later on in the webinar. When something challenging happens, it's important to explain that to them. So not just to pretend it didn't happen or pretend that they don't understand. Even the very youngest children, even babies, it's a good idea to warmly, kindly and truthfully explain to them what's happening. And also giving them overt reassurance. They need you to explicitly state that they're safe, you'll keep them safe, and you're getting the support you need, that they don't need to take care of you. You've got other grown-ups to do that, and your job is to take care of them. So those are some ideas around protecting your child. Being clear and honest is number 4. So clarity is so important. Respecting their developmental stage, of course. The amount of information you give a 2-year-old is going to be very different to the amount of information you give a 13-year-old. And I think it's really important to mention now that sometimes there is no easy answer and there is no good answer to their questions. Concrete information will help. So, for example, with divorce, letting them know how that's going to impact them day to day. Sweetheart, you're going to have 2 houses. You're going to stay with me 5 nights. You're going to stay with your other parent 2 nights a week. We'll only be 5 minutes away and you can call me anytime. Children really need to know about those concrete pieces of information. And for example, with death, again, it's so important to get clear on what you believe as a family and to communicate that clearly. But it can be quite confusing for children if we use euphemisms. Oh, she's gone away to a better place. They may not understand that at all. So explaining that death means that their body doesn't work anymore, we won't see them anymore, is so important for them to be able to process what's happening. And again, there's lots of great books at your local library or bookshop that will help with that process. So going into a little bit more depth with an example, which is divorce. If we get very clear on our own feelings and reasons for this happening, we can then be that calm captain of the ship, and hopefully both parents can sit with a child and state the facts of what will happen without any negotiating. So just, we did our best and we've decided that we're not going to live together anymore. It was a joint decision. Or if it's very clearly not a joint decision, you can explain to them one parent might feel quite sad, but he's going to get some support and be okay. And have that confidence in the future. This is the best decision for our family. We know that we're all going to do really great with this. I love the phrase two-home family. It's a great way for children to have an understanding that they're still a family, even when they live in 2 different houses, and that kids don't get divorced. Letting them know all of those details I mentioned before is really important. And also, 2 big things that research shows us children really focus on is they tend to be quite egocentric and feel that everything is about them. So really explaining very clearly, this is not your fault. Nothing you did made this happen and nothing you do could change this. This is something that we've decided as the grown-ups. And often children do want it to change back. And so being very clear with them that this isn't going to change back. This is our new reality and we know it's hard and we're here with you to listen to any feelings you might have about it. So on to the next point, asking questions, listening and accepting all feelings. So being a real receiver. And even the asking questions part, I would only do that to sort of get a sense of where they're at. But if they're coming to you with big feelings, you can just listen and accept all of those feelings. Hand-in-hand parenting calls this stay listening, because you literally stay and you listen. No need to fix, lecture or teach them, even if they're being really unreasonable. And we have an understanding in hand-in-hand parenting that tears are very, very healing. I'm sure you might have had that experience yourself. So often children will cry hard about small issues. So, for example, if they're faced with a beloved pet that's died, they may not cry at the moment that that's happened, but they may start to have big, big feelings in other areas. You know, when you give them the red cup instead of the blue cup, or for teenagers, they might start to have a few friendship issues. So often the tensions can come out in other areas. And it's important to note that laughter is also healing. So sometimes they can laugh at maybe times that you don't feel are that appropriate. So just knowing that laughter and tears are very healing, and we don't need to fix or change those things. We can just be with our children through whatever they're feeling and really welcome those feelings, sends a powerful message to them as they process whatever difficult situation they're going through, that they're okay. They're okay to have these feelings and that you're with them no matter what. As for repeating the conversation, it's important to know that difficult conversations are rarely a once-off event, and young children particularly might require repeated age-appropriate explanations and reminders, and in fact, they might demand it. So I know of one family where there was a family member that passed away, an extended family member, and one of the children repeatedly would ask for months after this person died, where did Granddad go? Why did he die? What happened when he died? What happened to his body? And needed to go through those details again and again. So you can expect that that might be the case, particularly with younger children. But also, children's brains are still in development, in fact, until they're in their mid-20s. So they do need repeated information about what's happening and support to take on that information, not as a lecture, but just as a factual, warm offering to support them. And I've put on the PowerPoint presentation, tone matters. So the way we offer that conversation is actually literally probably 90%. What we know about communication is that only 7% of our communication is the words that we use. 43% is the tone of voice that we use, and 50% is our body language, eye contact, things like that. So when we're having these difficult conversations, we can be aware of that and really bring the warmest, kindest, most loving tone that we can to these tricky spaces so that our children can really feel that sense of support. Now we get to some tools that you can offer your child that give help to them as they're processing difficult experiences in their lives. One of my favourites is special time. This is a hand-in-hand parenting tool, but it's one that's offered in a lot of different spaces in the parenting world. Hand-in-hand parenting suggests that we actually use a timer to do this because it sets this time aside and literally makes it special. You can use this as a preventative tool, but it really opens up lines of communication between you and your child in such a beautiful way when it becomes a practice. So if it's something that you do every day or once a week or whenever you can fit it in, it becomes something reliable for your child. So we suggest that you name it. You may name it special time. You could ask your child to name it. We suggest that you use a timer and you time it and maybe start with just 5 minutes because it can be tricky. We suggest that you schedule it. Sweetheart, every Monday, Wednesday and Friday before you go to daycare, we're going to have 5 minutes, just you and me together. And what it involves is you doing whatever that child would like to do. So really following their lead. No teaching, no lecturing, no explaining, no asking questions, just following the lead and delighting in them. Allowing time for any feelings that might come up here is really important. In the same way that you might go out for dinner with an old friend who you know really cherishes you and they say, "How are you really?" and you burst into tears, that can be the experience of special time, that this is a time when children bring their big feelings. And again, another story from a family that I've worked with who've given me permission to share this. They did this regularly and they had a number of deaths in the family and found that their 3-year-old would only ask about death and about, what happened and are you going to die, mummy? And when will I die, mummy? All of those huge questions were only ever asked during special time. And I find that really interesting because it's a time when our child really knows they've got our attention. So we don't do the laundry, we don't have a cup of tea, we don't answer the phone. For that 5 minutes, everything in us is focused on that child 110%. So the magic in this is you and your attention. This is like a connection vitamin, and it's a really active form of listening. It's a way for you to really get a window into your child's experience of whatever tough situations they're faced with. They may say, yes, mummy, I want to play dying, I guess. I've certainly seen this where children play around with ideas like this. Or, yes, mummy, let's play families, and the mummy and the daddy are splitting up. They're in different houses, and you can say, okay, let's see what happens. So it's a really active form of listening, and it's a lovely way to provide a conduit between you for connection and for them to ask the questions they might have and to start those conversations themselves. Now, another way that you can support your child, however old they are, teenagers need this too, is by bringing play. So often we're really serious, and rightly so, about a lot of those topics, but children actually process and learn best through play. And so, for example, as I said, I've seen children playing around with ideas about death. So they're all on the trampoline, and one of them would say, right, you're all dead. And they'd all fall over making silly faces and giggle. That's children learning about what death is and processing it. So if we can follow their lead, take the less powerful role and follow their giggles, this is what's called play listening in hand-in-hand parenting. And it's a great way to trust our children to find ways to process whatever is happening in their lives. So, for example, you might throw cushions at them on the couch. So you take the less powerful role by missing them every single time and being confounded by how strong and brave and fast they are. Oh my goodness, how did you do that? Right, I'm going to get you this time. And they giggle and giggle and giggle. That's such an important experience for a 3 or a 4 or a 5-year-old, because so much of their lives is they experience a feeling of powerlessness. So we want to take that less powerful role with no overpowering, for example, tickling. We really recommend not tickling, and following their giggles. And another thing you might like to try is symbolic play. So they might get some stuffed toys out and act out whatever's happening. And that's another way to see what they're feeling and experiencing. So special time and play listening are really beautiful ways to support our children to process difficult experiences with play. And earlier on, I mentioned stay listening, which is the other great tool from hand-in-hand parenting, where when we have these conversations, so for example, at that really difficult conversation around divorce, a child may have some very big feelings. And rather than trying to fix it or change those feelings, we just stay and listen, having real confidence that when a child gets to the other side of that kind of arc of emotion, that they'll feel a lot better, a lot lighter, and more able to think well. Now, the other side of this coin is for us to offer all of this help and support to our children, we really need help and support ourselves. So I want to mention listening partnerships again. It's such a great tool, meeting regularly with another parent, swapping equal time, so we actually use a timer, and keeping it confidential without referring back. No judgment, no advice, no fixing, no interruptions. It is magic for giving we busy parents a space to process what's going on and to figure out, what am I going to say to my little one when I tell them about this hard thing that's happening? Or what do I want to share with my 5-year-old or my 7-year-old or my 10-year-old about difficult topics like online porn, for example? How am I going to protect my child? Where do I want to go with this? What do I want to say? Having a space to figure that out is really invaluable. And finally, I'd say sometimes we really do need outside help. And that's where counsellors, play therapists, psychologists are really helpful. And you can visit your local GP for a mental health plan, or reach out to one of the organisations on the resources handout that I'll share with you in a moment. Some other resources here to explore the ideas further. There's a whole number of links in the PowerPoint presentation around natural disasters, consent, talking about death, divorce, cyberbullying, online porn, sexting, and safety issues online. So there's so much information out there. Hopefully having these links gives you that needle in the proverbial haystack when you need something reliable to help you with those conversations. And here's the resource sheet that I mentioned: Lifeline, Kids Helpline, Crisis Care, Nagala Parenting Line. There's a lot of great supports here for parents and for children. You might also like to look at some of the websites listed here: raisingchildren.net.au, and there's also the Hand in Hand Parenting site there. So we're at the end of the webinar, and in summary, we've looked at the fact that tough conversations are a part of parenting. There's not really a way to get out of this. They're going to happen. So preparing ourselves and getting support to release our own tensions is such an important part of the process. Finding ways to protect our child as they move through difficult moments, and being clear and honest when we do have those conversations, and then asking questions and really hearing their experience, listening and accepting all of their feelings. So that stay listening tool that I mentioned is a powerful way to support them. Focusing on your love and your care as you repeat the conversation, and giving help through things like special time, where we set the timer and just follow their lead delightedly, creating that beautiful space in our lives together for them to share things with us. And play listening, where we take the less powerful role and follow the giggles. That gives them those beautiful spaces of play and connection to buffer them against any challenges. Finally, getting help. We all do need it, particularly we busy parents. And if you feel that your child needs some extra support too, those spaces can be great for getting some extra help for them. So I would love to request that anyone who's listening in might fill in the poll, which is listed on the PowerPoint presentation and is in the email that I sent to you. And please know that Miralinga offers lots of these online recorded webinars that you can listen into at any time that suits you. But we also do a lot of in-person and online interactive workshops that we'd love to see you at. There's lots of resources and support available for parents. So I want to thank you for everything that you do for your family. It's such important work, but it's really complex, challenging work. So thank you for doing it with your whole heart. Really appreciate everything you do. Thanks for being here.